The woman who controlled 38 floors of Manhattan real estate was running through Madison Square Park like her life depended on it. Because it did. Elena Hartwell had built an empire on calculated risks and iron composure, but nothing in her corner office on the 38th floor had prepared her for this moment at 3:47 on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Her blonde hair streamed behind her, pulled loose from the severe bun she wore like armor in boardrooms and negotiations. The cashmere sweater she had chosen specifically to look approachable, normal, anonymous, now clung to her with the sweat of genuine terror. 10 seconds to disappear, 5 seconds to make a choice that would change everything. The voice behind her cut through the ambient noise of children laughing and pigeons scattering. Sharp, possessive, entirely too close. "Elena, I know you're here. We need to talk." Her eyes swept the playground with the same rapid assessment she brought to hostile acquisitions. Families scattered across benches, a hot dog vendor arguing with a customer about mustard. Children on swings, their joy a stark contrast to the panic clawing at her chest. And there, near the northeast corner, a man sitting alone with a little girl, both of them watching a pigeon with the kind of focused attention that suggested they had nowhere else to be, no urgent demands pulling them in 17 directions at once. Elena made the most desperate decision of her 39 years. Her legs carried her forward before her mind could construct the rational arguments against what she was about to do. Then she was falling into the stranger's lap with the full force of her desperation, her face buried against his shoulder, her hands gripping his jacket like he was the only solid thing in a world that had been spinning out of control for 8 months. Her whisper came out, pressed against the warmth of his neck, words she had never imagined saying to anyone, let alone a complete stranger. "Pretend you know me. Pretend we're together. I'll explain everything, I promise." "Just please, he's right behind me." The man's arms came up instinctively to catch her, his body responding before his mind could process what was happening. She felt the moment of tension, the natural human reaction to a stranger invading personal space with the force of a small hurricane. And then something shifted. His arms tightened around her in what she hoped looked like a familiar embrace, rather than the accommodation of a bizarre situation spinning rapidly beyond anyone's control. His voice was low, steady, surprisingly calm for someone who had just had a terrified CEO land in his lap without warning. "Okay, I've got you." 3 words, simple, direct, and somehow, impossibly, they loosened something that had been wound tight in Elena's chest for months. Marcus Reed had learned to treasure the small moments in the 4 years since Lauren's death, the ones that slipped between the cracks of data analysis reports and deadline pressures, the ones that existed in the golden hour of a Tuesday afternoon when he could leave Hartwell Publishing's analytics division early and claim a piece of normalcy in a life that had become an intricate dance of schedules and the constant low-grade anxiety of single parenthood to a daughter with a heart condition that required vigilance he sometimes felt crushing him. Today that moment was supposed to be this bench, watching his 6-year-old daughter Sophie chase pigeons with the fearless joy that made his chest ache with love and terror in equal measure. She had inherited her mother's curly hair and his careful observation of the world, the way she noticed things others overlooked, and asked questions that cut straight to the heart of matters adults preferred to leave unexamined. The purple backpack she insisted on wearing everywhere was a tribute to Lauren, whose favorite color had been purple, whose smile had been like sunlight, whose absence still carved a hollow space in their small apartment that no amount of rearranging furniture could fill. He had not expected that careful life to be upended by a woman falling into his lap and whispering for help. But here he was. The woman pulled back just enough to look at him, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He knew this face. Everyone at Hartwell Publishing knew this face. It appeared in company newsletters and industry magazines, and the carefully orchestrated press releases that accompanied quarterly earnings reports. Elena Hartwell, CEO and majority shareholder of the company that bore her family name. The woman whose single signature on a contract could launch careers or end them. The youngest person ever to take the helm of a major New York publishing house, thrust into power at 35 when her father's 18-month battle with pancreatic cancer had finally, mercifully, ended. Recognition flashed in her ice-blue eyes, even through her panic, that legendary memory he had heard about in whispered break-room conversations, proving itself in real time. Mr. Reed, Analytics Division, Data Integrity Team, the fact that she knew his name, that she could place him among the hundreds of employees scattered across Hartwell Publishing's Manhattan headquarters, should have surprised him. It did not. Elena Hartwell's memory was part of her mystique, part of what made her simultaneously feared and respected throughout the publishing industry. Part of what made grown men in expensive suits nervous when she walked into acquisition meetings. His voice came out low, careful, aware of his daughter's presence 3 feet away, still absorbed in her study of a pigeon with a damaged foot. "Miss Hartwell!" The shout cut through the ambient noise before she could respond. Closer now, tinged with the particular frustration of someone used to being obeyed. "Elena! Elena, I know you're here!" The woman in Marcus's arms flinched, and he felt it through his entire body. Without thinking, he turned his face toward hers, his hand coming up to cup the back of her head in a gesture that he hoped looked intimate and protective to anyone watching from a distance. Her forehead pressed against his, and up close, he could see that carefully applied makeup could not quite hide the exhaustion, the fine lines of stress around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. His voice dropped to the same tone he used when Sophie woke from nightmares about hospitals and beeping machines and doctors with serious faces. "It's okay. I'm right here." A man emerged from between the trees bordering the playground's eastern edge. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive gray suit that marked him as someone who moved in the same circles as Elena Hartwell. His eyes scanned the crowd with predatory focus, and Marcus felt Elena's hands grip his jacket tighter, her breath warm and ragged against his ear. "That's Marcus Donovan, my ex. He won't leave me alone." The man, Donovan, was moving through the park systematically, approaching blonde women, speaking to them with an intensity that made several step back uncomfortably. He was getting closer, working his way through the scattered families and couples with the determination of someone who had done this before, who knew all the places she might hide. Marcus's mind raced through options with the same analytical precision he brought to datasets at work. He could stand, confront the man, make a scene that would draw attention, and hopefully send Donovan away. But that felt wrong. Felt like it would escalate rather than diffuse, turn an already volatile situation into something that could spiral beyond anyone's control. Or he could do what Elena had asked, pretend this was normal, pretend they were exactly what they appeared to be from a distance, a couple spending an afternoon in the park, stealing a quiet moment while their daughter played. "Trust me." He lifted his hand to her face, turning her head just slightly, creating the illusion of a private moment between lovers. He did not kiss her. That felt like a violation of something he could not name, a line he would not cross, even in service of this desperate charade. But he let his thumb trace the line of her jaw in a gesture that from 10 feet away would read as tenderness, as familiarity, as the comfortable intimacy of two people who knew each other's bodies and histories. Elena understood immediately. She let her body relax against his, let one hand slide to his chest in a position that suggested she had every right to be there, that this was where she belonged. To anyone watching, they were just another couple in the park, stealing a quiet moment while autumn painted the world in shades of gold and amber. Donovan passed within 10 feet of them. Marcus kept his breathing steady, his hand gentle on her face, his body language protective but casual. "Just a man with his girlfriend. Nothing to see here. Nothing remarkable about two people holding each other while a child played nearby, while the city hummed with its endless rhythm of strangers and stories intersecting for brief moments before spinning apart again." Donovan's eyes swept over them and moved on, pulled by the sight of another blonde woman near the fountain, his hunt taking him toward the street exits on the park's eastern edge. They stayed frozen like that for what felt like hours, but was probably less than a minute. Finally, Donovan's voice echoed from the far side of the park, still calling Elena's name, still searching, but the sound was receding, his frustrated hunt moving away from them. The voice that shattered the moment was small and curious and entirely unexpected.
"Daddy, the pretty lady is shaking."
Marcus's eyes snapped to his daughter, who had apparently abandoned her pigeon study to approach them with the grave concern she brought to all matters of apparent distress. Her brown eyes, so much like Lauren's had been, moved from Elena's face to Marcus's with the penetrating attention of a child who missed nothing, who catalogued details with frightening accuracy. Elena moved to stand immediately, but Marcus's hand on her shoulder stopped her. Too sudden, too reactive. Instead, he helped her shift to sit beside him on the bench, creating proper space while maintaining the illusion of casual intimacy for anyone who might still be watching. "Sophie, hey, come here. This is my friend Elena. She surprised me." Sophie approached cautiously, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. Her eyes moved from Elena's face to her clothes, to her hands, to the way she was sitting beside her father, cataloging details with the same methodical attention she brought to her crayon drawings of families that always included 3 figures: daddy, daughter, and a purple angel watching from the clouds. "You made Daddy jump." Elena's response came with a shift in tone that Marcus found startling. The fear evaporated from her expression, replaced by something gentler, something that softened the sharp edges of her corporate armor in a way he suspected she rarely allowed. "I did. I'm sorry. That was rude of me." Sophie took another step closer, curiosity overtaking caution in the way it always did with her. That fearless approach to the world that both filled Marcus with pride and terrified him in equal measure. "It's okay. You're really pretty, like a princess in the books Daddy reads." A genuine smile flickered across Elena's face, and Marcus saw something crack in that legendary composure, something human and vulnerable beneath the CEO who commanded boardrooms and multi-million-dollar deals. "Thank you. You're very kind. And you're much prettier than any princess I've ever met." Sophie held out her hand with the solemnity she had learned from watching adults greet each other, a gesture that never failed to make Marcus's heart clench with love and grief for the mother who should have been here to see it. "I'm Sophie." Elena shook the small hand with equal seriousness, as if this were a merger negotiation rather than a conversation with a 6-year-old in a playground. "It's wonderful to meet you, Sophie. That's a beautiful name." "It means wise. Daddy told me." "He also told me that wise people notice things other people miss." Marcus watched the exchange with a mixture of pride and something he could not quite identify. His daughter had a gift for reading people, for seeing past surfaces to the truth underneath. She had asked at 4 years old why their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, always smiled, even though her eyes looked sad. She had announced at 5 that her kindergarten teacher was scared of thunderstorms, even though she pretended not to be when the other kids got nervous. And now she was studying Elena Hartwell with the same penetrating attention. Sophie tilted her head, her curls bouncing with the movement, catching the afternoon light in a way that made Marcus's chest tight with memories of Lauren doing the exact same thing when she was thinking hard about something. "You seem sad under the pretty." The words hung in the air like a held breath. Elena went completely still, and Marcus saw the moment the observation landed, saw the way it cut through defenses that had probably taken decades to build, layer by careful layer. Her eyes glistened for just a moment before she blinked it away, and her voice was soft, almost inaudible. "Maybe I am a little sad." "Why?" Marcus's tone carried a gentle warning. "Sophie, that's a personal question." "It's okay." Elena looked at Sophie with something raw in her expression, something Marcus suspected she did not show often, maybe ever, in the carefully controlled world she inhabited 38 floors above the streets of Manhattan. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad about complicated things. Things that are hard to explain." Sophie considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing constitutional matters, and Marcus had to suppress a smile despite the strangeness of the situation. despite the fact that a CEO was sitting on a park bench explaining her emotional state to his 6-year-old daughter. Daddy says when I'm sad, I should talk to someone I trust. Do you have someone to talk to? The question was innocent, childlike, delivered with the absolute conviction that adults surely must have the same support systems that children did. And somehow, it was also the most devastating thing Marcus had heard in years, because he could see in Elena's expression that the answer was no. That this woman who controlled millions of dollars and hundreds of careers had no one she trusted enough to show this kind of vulnerability. Elena's answer came after a long pause, each word carefully measured. I'm working on it. Good. Sophie climbed onto the bench between them, apparently deciding that Elena had passed whatever test she had been conducting, that this stranger was safe enough to join their small circle of afternoon park rituals. Do you like pigeons? The shift in topic was so abrupt that Marcus almost laughed. This was his daughter in a nutshell. Profound observations followed by complete non sequiturs, delivered with absolute confidence in the logic connecting them. Elena blinked, clearly not expecting that conversational turn. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it. That one has a funny foot. Sophie pointed at the limping pigeon that had returned to forage near their bench, pecking at scattered pretzel crumbs with the determined efficiency of a creature that had learned to survive in a hostile world. We've been watching it. Daddy says it probably got hurt but learned to walk differently so it could still find food. He says that's called adapting. Marcus met Elena's eyes over his daughter's head, and in that moment, 1,000 unspoken questions hung in the air between them. But Sophie was there, innocent and unaware, and the situation required navigation more delicate than either of them had prepared for. His voice dropped low, meant only for Elena. Is he still out there? I don't know. Elena's eyes scanned the park perimeter with the practiced vigilance of someone who had been hunted long enough to develop constant awareness. But you're safe here. She looked at him with something like surprise. How can you be sure? I can't, but it seemed like the right thing to say. The honesty of it made something shift in her expression. Not quite a smile, not quite relief. Something in between that Marcus filed away to examine later when he was alone and could think clearly about what had just happened, about what he had just agreed to by holding this woman and pretending she belonged in his arms. How bad is this? His question was direct, practical, the same tone he used when Sophie's school called about a scraped knee or a friendship dispute that required parental intervention. Elena's voice dropped to barely a whisper, her eyes on Sophie, who was now absorbed in breaking off pieces of her pretzel to throw to the pigeon. He's been following me for 8 months. Ever since I ended things, he thinks... She stopped, glanced at Sophie again, clearly weighing how much to say in front of a child. He thinks I'm making a mistake. That I'll come back. Will you? No. The word was absolute, final, carrying the weight of a decision that had been tested and retested and found unshakable. Never. But he won't accept that. Have you called the police? Elena's laugh was bitter, exhausted, the sound of someone who had already traveled down every logical path and found them all blocked. And tell them what? That my ex-boyfriend is trying to talk to me in public places? That he's calling my name? There's no threat, no violence, just persistence. She paused, and something harder entered her voice. His father is Federal Judge William Donovan, Southern District of New York. My lawyer says unless Marcus does something overtly illegal, I'm better off not escalating. That the Donovan family has connections that could make my life very difficult if I push the wrong buttons. Marcus processed this, his mind shifting through implications with the same analytical precision he brought to data integrity audits. The man had looked expensive, had moved with the confidence of someone used to getting his way, someone who had never been told no in a way that actually stuck. If he was willing to hunt Elena through a public park in broad daylight, what else was he capable of? That sounds like stalking. Try proving it in court when his family has connections to half the judges in the Southern District. Sophie's voice interrupted them again, bright with discovery.
Daddy, look! The pigeon likes me!
She had crouched on the ground, pretzel pieces scattered around her feet, and the limping pigeon was indeed eating from her palm with the cautious trust of a creature that had learned to take kindness where it could find it.
Can we keep him, please?
No, sweetheart. Pigeons need to stay in the park.
But he's lonely, I can tell.
Marcus glanced at Elena and caught something raw in her expression as she watched Sophie. Something that looked like longing mixed with pain. It was gone in an instant, hidden behind the composure she wore like a second skin. But he had seen it, and it changed something in how he understood the woman sitting beside him. This CEO who ran an empire, but looked at his daughter with the eyes of someone who ached for connection she had convinced herself she could not have. Lily, the pigeon has a whole family here. All the other pigeons. He's not lonely, I promise. Sophie considered this with the gravity she brought to important matters, her head tilted in that way that reminded him so much of Lauren it hurt. Okay, but I'm going to visit him every time we come here. Deal. Elena stood then, smoothing her jeans in a gesture that looked like an attempt to reclaim composure, to rebuild the walls that Sophie's innocent observations had temporarily breached. I should go. Before he comes back. She looked at Marcus, and for a moment the mask slipped again, showing the fear and exhaustion underneath. Thank you for what you did. I know it was bizarre and inappropriate, and I'm sorry for putting you in that position. It's okay. Marcus stood as well, keeping himself between her and the direction Donovan had gone. A protective instinct he had not felt for anyone except Sophie since Lauren died. Are you going to be all right? I always am. It's what I do. The smile she offered was practiced, professional, the kind of smile that had probably closed million-dollar deals and ended careers with equal efficiency. Marcus recognized it for what it was. Armor. Defense. The face she showed the world to hide whatever was breaking underneath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card, then grabbed a pen from her purse and wrote something on the back with quick, precise strokes. My personal cell. If Marcus contacts you, or if there's any fallout from this, call me immediately. I'll handle it. Marcus took the card, feeling the weight of expensive cardstock between his fingers. On the front, embossed lettering, Elena Hartwell, Chief Executive Officer, Hartwell Publishing. On the back, a phone number in neat, precise handwriting. I mean it. Elena's voice carried an edge of something he could not quite identify, something fierce and protective that seemed at odds with her corporate image. Any problems at work? Anything at all? You call me. I won't let this affect your position at the company. I'm not worried about that. Then you're not thinking clearly. But with each step, she pulled herself taller, straightened her shoulders, became once again the untouchable Elena Hartwell, who ran a publishing empire with calculated precision and the kind of ruthless efficiency that made competitors nervous. By the time she reached the park entrance, she was checking her phone with the brisk efficiency of someone whose time was worth thousands of dollars per hour, whose attention was divided among 17 different crises that all required her immediate input. Sophie appeared at his side, slipping her small hand into his with the easy trust that made his chest ache. Daddy? Is Elena okay? I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. She seemed sad under the pretty. He looked down at his daughter, at her serious expression, and wondered how someone so young could see so clearly what adults spent decades learning to hide. Yeah, I think maybe she is. Maybe she needs a friend. Maybe she does. They stayed in the park for another hour, but Marcus's attention was split now, constantly scanning the trees and pathways for signs of Donovan's return. He saw when they finally headed home to their small apartment in a building wedged between a bodega and a dry cleaner, Sophie chattering about the pigeon and whether they could come back tomorrow. Marcus found his hand going to his pocket, feeling the edge of Elena's business card like a talisman against uncertainties he could not yet name. The offices of Hartwell Publishing occupied floors 36 through 38 of a gleaming tower in Midtown, a testament to old money meeting new ambition. Marcus arrived Wednesday morning with the same mixture of exhaustion and determination that powered most of his days. Sophie was safely deposited at her school's before care program, her morning medications administered, her teacher briefed on the new heart monitor readings from yesterday's cardiology appointment. His mind was already organizing the day's priorities as he crossed the marble lobby. The revenue analysis for the literary fiction division needed his final review by noon. The quarterly projections meeting was at 2. Phone call with the IT department about database integrity at 3:30. It was a manageable day, the kind he had learned to navigate while still leaving early enough to pick Sophie up by 6, to make dinner, to supervise homework and medications and bedtime stories, and all the 1,000 small rituals that made up their life. He was halfway to the elevators when he heard his name. "Marcus, wait up!" Lucas Hayes, one of the other senior analysts and Marcus's closest thing to a friend at Hartwell Publishing, jogged across the marble lobby, his messenger bag bouncing against his hip. Lucas had the perpetually rumpled look of someone who cared more about data than appearance, his dark hair always slightly too long, his ties always slightly askew. "Did you hear?" "Hear what?" Lucas jabbed the elevator button with unnecessary force. "The drama on 38. Apparently, Elena Hartwell fired 3 executives yesterday afternoon. Just walked into their offices and told them to pack up. No warning, no severance negotiation, just gone." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, a connection forming in his mind that he did not want to examine too closely yet. Why? Why? That's the question, isn't it? No one knows for sure, but the rumor is it's something personal, not performance-related. Lucas studied him with the same careful attention he applied to anomalies in datasets. People are saying she's been on edge for months. More than usual, I mean. Something's going on. Marcus said nothing, thinking about the woman who had trembled in his arms, who had looked at his daughter with such naked longing it had hurt to witness, thinking about a man named Marcus Donovan, who thought persistence was the same thing as love, who had the kind of connections that made even telling the truth dangerous. The elevator arrived and they stepped in with a handful of other employees, all of whom were engaged in their own versions of the executive firing gossip. Marcus tuned it out, watching the floor numbers climb, thinking about Elena's words. "He won't leave me alone." What if the firings were not random? What if Donovan had connections at Hartwell Publishing? People feeding him information about Elena's movements, her schedule, the small vulnerabilities that accumulate when you run a company and trust the wrong people. The elevator stopped at 36, and Marcus stepped out into the familiar organized chaos of the analytics floor. His office was a small glass cube overlooking the city, a space he had personalized with photos of Sophie and Lauren, with the purple crayon drawing Sophie had made of their family that always included a third figure watching from the clouds. He had barely settled at his desk when his phone rang. Internal number. From the 38th floor. His hand hesitated over the receiver. The 38th floor was executive territory, a place analysts ventured only when summoned for very good reasons or very bad ones. The gap between those two options felt impossibly wide. "Marcus Reed?" "Mr. Reed, this is Catherine, Mrs. Hartwell's executive assistant. Mrs. Hartwell would like to see you in her office at your earliest convenience." The voice was professional, efficient, revealing nothing. "Is this about a project?" "I'm not at liberty to say." "Are you available now?" He looked at his schedule, at the careful architecture of his day, at the revenue analysis that needed his attention. "Yes, I'll be right up." The 38th floor was a different world from the analytics division's controlled chaos. Here, everything was sleek glass and polished leather, muted colors and expensive art that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. The silence had weight to it, the kind of quiet that came from people who understood the value of discretion, who knew that fortunes could be made or lost based on who heard what conversation. Catherine, a woman in her 50s with the composed efficiency of someone who managed other people's disasters for a living, greeted him with a professional smile that revealed nothing. "Mr. Reed, please have a seat." Miss Hartwell will be with you shortly. Marcus sat in one of the leather chairs outside Elena's office, his hands clasped between his knees, feeling distinctly out of place in his off-the-rack suit and department store tie. Through the glass wall, he could see Elena on the phone, her expression sharp with concentration. She was back in her armor, tailored charcoal suit, hair in that severe bun, every inch the corporate warrior. She looked nothing like the frightened woman from the park. The call ended, and Elena's eyes found him through the glass. Something flickered in her expression. Recognition, perhaps concern. And then she was standing, gesturing for Catherine to send him in. Marcus entered her office, and the door clicked shut behind him with the finality of a vault ceiling. The space was larger than his entire apartment, decorated with the kind of understated luxury that came from generations of wealth, rather than new money trying to prove itself. Mr. Reed. Elena was standing behind her desk, her posture rigid, every line of her body radiating control. Thank you for coming up. Please, sit. He sat. The chair was expensive and uncomfortable in the way that all expensive corporate furniture seemed to be, designed more for appearance than actual use. Elena did not sit. Instead, she moved to the window, her back to him, looking out over Manhattan with the bearing of someone surveying a kingdom she had never asked to inherit, but now defended with everything she had. I assume you've heard the rumors about yesterday's terminations. Some. Lucas mentioned it. Lucas Hayes, Senior Analyst, Commercial Data Division. Good instincts for market trends, though he tends to overweight recent performance in his projections. She turned to face him, and her expression was unreadable. The 3 people I fired yesterday all had one thing in common. They were feeding information about my schedule and movements to Marcus Donovan. The cold feeling in Marcus's stomach solidified into certainty. Your ex. My ex. Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut. Apparently he's been cultivating informants in my own company. People I trusted. People who thought his family connections and his money were worth more than their loyalty to me. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm better off knowing who I can't trust. She moved back to her desk, finally sitting, and some of the rigid control seemed to ease fractionally. I wanted to see you because I need to know if he's contacted you. After yesterday, after what happened in the park. No, nothing. Good. But she did not look relieved. He may not have recognized you, or he may be waiting, gathering information before he makes a move. Marcus is patient when he wants to be. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. Ms. Hartwell. Elena, why are you telling me this? You could have sent an email or just increased building security. Because you have a daughter. The words came out flat, factual, but Marcus heard the weight behind them. Heard something fierce and protective that seemed at odds with the cool corporate image. Because if Marcus decides you're actually important to me, if he thinks yesterday was real, he might try to use that against me. Against both of us. Her voice dropped, something raw bleeding through the professional veneer. And I won't have a 6-year-old child caught in the crossfire of my mistakes. The protective fury in her voice surprised him, cut through his own defenses in a way he had not expected. Sophie's safe. I'm careful about that. I'm sure you are, but I'm offering resources if you need them. Security, legal support, whatever it takes to keep your daughter safe while this plays out. While what plays out? Elena studied him for a long moment, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling she was weighing options, calculating risks with the same precision she probably brought to merger negotiations and hostile takeover defenses. I've hired a private investigator to document Marcus's harassment. I'm building a case for a restraining order, but I need evidence of a pattern, of escalation. My lawyer says it could take weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime, you're careful. You vary your routine. You don't go out alone when you can avoid it. She nodded. Yesterday was a mistake. I was feeling claustrophobic in my apartment. I thought if I just went for a walk in a public place during daylight, I'd be fine. You wanted to feel normal. The observation seemed to catch her off guard. and for a moment the corporate mask slipped enough to show the woman underneath.
Yes, I suppose I did.
Marcus thought about what Lucas had said, about Elena being terrifying, about executives being afraid of her. Looking at her now, he saw something different. Not terror, but terrible isolation. The kind that came from being at the top with no one to trust, no one to call when you needed help, when you were running through a park because the man who claimed to love you had turned that love into a weapon. The question came out before he could stop it.
You don't have friends, do you? Real friends, I mean. Not business contacts or professional relationships. Elena's expression hardened.
That's an inappropriate question, Mr. Reed.
Maybe. But it's true, isn't it?
For a moment, he thought she might call security, might fire him on the spot for insubordination, for crossing a line that should have remained uncrossed. Instead, she sat back in her chair, and something that might have been humor flickered in her eyes.
You're either very brave or very stupid.
I'm a single father raising a daughter with a heart condition while working full-time and trying to honor my late wife's memory. Marcus met her eyes steadily. I gave up on being either brave or stupid when Sophie was born. Now I'm just practical. And practically speaking? Practically speaking, you need help. Not the kind money can buy, the kind that comes from actually having someone on your side. Marcus stood, preparing to leave before he said something that would definitely get him fired. I'm not here because of your money or your position. I'm here because you said please when you needed help, and because my daughter thought you looked sad under the pretty. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything neither of them was saying, with implications that scared Marcus more than he wanted to admit.
What are you suggesting?
Elena's voice was careful, guarded, the voice of someone who had learned not to trust easy offers or simple solutions. I'm suggesting that maybe yesterday's pretending doesn't have to be just yesterday. If Marcus is watching, if he has people feeding him information, maybe we give them something to report. You, with someone, building a life that doesn't include him. You're offering to be my fake boyfriend. There was no inflection in her voice, no indication of what she thought of the idea. I'm offering to be your friend. The boyfriend thing, that's just logistics. Marcus moved toward the door, needing to leave before this conversation went places he was not prepared for, before he committed himself to something that could change everything about his carefully constructed life. Think about it. You know where to find me. 2 floors down, drowning in data analysis and trying to convince the finance team that predictive modeling still matters. He was almost to the door when she spoke again. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Marcus turned back, and the honesty of what he was about to say scared him almost as much as watching Sophie's heart monitor spike during her last cardiology appointment. Because yesterday, when you asked for help, you didn't demand it. You asked. You said, please, and because my daughter thought you looked sad under the pretty, and she's usually right about people. He shrugged, the gesture more vulnerable than he intended. And maybe because being alone when you're scared isn't something anyone should have to do. Not even untouchable CEOs. He left before she could respond, before she could see that his hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline of essentially offering himself as bait in a situation he did not fully understand. The elevator ride down to 36 felt longer than usual, and Marcus leaned against the brushed steel wall, wondering if he had just made the best or worst decision of his life. He had no idea which, but the weight of Elena's business card in his pocket felt heavier now, transformed from a simple contact into something that carried the possibility of changing everything about the careful balance he had built between grief and survival, between honoring Lauren's memory and allowing himself the dangerous luxury of caring about someone new. The call came 3 days later at 8:30 on a Saturday morning while Marcus was making pancakes and Sophie was watching cartoons in her pajamas, her heart monitor beeping its steady reassurance from the charging station in the kitchen. His phone lit up with a number he had entered into his contacts, but never expected to actually use. Elena Hartwell, personal cell. He stepped into the hallway, away from Sophie's hearing, before answering. "Marcus?" Her voice was tight with stress, frayed at the edges in a way that suggested she had been awake most of the night. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Are you free this afternoon, around 3? He thought about his plans. Grocery shopping that could be postponed, laundry that would still be there tomorrow, maybe the park if the weather held and Sophie's energy level stayed stable. "Yes. What do you need?" "I need you to meet my mother." The request was so unexpected that Marcus actually pulled the phone away from his ear to make sure he had heard correctly. "Your mother?" "She's in town for the weekend, staying at the plaza. She called last night and insisted on taking me to tea." Elena's voice dropped lower, and Marcus could hear the exhaustion bleeding through every word. "Marcus's mother and mine are old friends. They've been talking. My mother has opinions about my life choices, and if I show up alone, she's going to spend 2 hours lecturing me about settling down and making better relationship decisions. So you want me to be your buffer. I want you to be evidence that I'm not the disaster she thinks I am." There was a pause, and when Elena spoke again, her voice was quieter, more vulnerable than he had heard it, except for that moment in the park when she had whispered, "Please. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. Forget I asked." "No." Marcus surprised himself with the firmness of his response. "Don't forget you asked. What time should I meet you?" "You're serious?" "I offered to help. This is help." He heard what might have been a laugh, soft and surprised, barely audible through the phone connection. "The Palm Court at the plaza. 3 o'clock. She hesitated. "Marcus, my mother is difficult. She has opinions about everything, and she won't be shy about sharing them. I raise a 6-year-old who asks why the sky is blue and then immediately wants to know why blue is called blue, and whether colors exist if no one can see them. I think I can handle difficult." After they hung up, Marcus stood in his hallway, staring at his phone, wondering what exactly he had just agreed to. Meeting the mother. That was a milestone. A marker of seriousness even in fake relationships, especially feel less fake with every conversation, every moment of vulnerability that passed between them like secrets neither of them had planned to share. His usual Saturday babysitter was attending a wedding upstate. His backup had the flu, confirmed via a text message that had come through at midnight, with profuse apologies and promises to be available next week. By 2 o'clock, Marcus had exhausted his options and was left with one choice: bring Sophie along and hope for the best. He dressed carefully, choosing clothes that split the difference between too casual and trying too hard. Dark jeans without visible wear, a button-down shirt in deep blue that Lauren had always said made his eyes stand out. His good jacket that he usually reserved for the rare occasions when the analytics division interfaced with actual decision-makers. Sophie insisted on wearing her purple dress, the one with sparkly butterflies that she had picked out herself from a thrift store in Brooklyn, and Marcus did not have the heart to argue. She was happy, her morning readings had been stable, and sometimes that was enough. The Plaza Hotel rose like a monument to gilded excess on the corner of Fifth Avenue, and Marcus felt distinctly out of place walking through the ornate entrance with his daughter's hand in his. This was not his world. His world was cramped apartments and grocery store cupcakes for birthdays, public school fundraisers, and dollar pizza slices when Sophie wanted a treat. This world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers and doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than his monthly rent felt like a museum dedicated to a life he would never understand. The Palm Court was a symphony of white marble and soaring ceilings, towering palm trees, and the gentle clink of expensive china. Nathan spotted Elena immediately. She was sitting at a corner table with a woman who could only be her mother, both of them dressed in the kind of elegant simplicity that cost more than most people made in a month. Elena saw him and stood, and something like relief flashed across her face before she smoothed it into a welcoming smile. "Marcus, thank you for coming." She was wearing a dress in soft gray, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back in that severe bun, and she looked more like the woman from the park than the CEO from the boardroom. It made something in Marcus's chest tighten unexpectedly. Of course, he was acutely aware of Sophie pressing against his side, suddenly shy in the face of such overwhelming elegance. "I hope it's okay that I brought Sophie. Childcare fell through." "It's perfect." Elena crouched down to Sophie's level, that same gentle transformation Marcus had witnessed in the park happening again. The corporate warrior becoming something softer, more human. "Hi, Sophie. It's good to see you again. I'd like you to meet my mother. She's kind of like a queen, so don't be nervous." They approached the table, and Elena's mother rose with the kind of grace that came from decades of practice and probably finishing school instruction. Catherine Hartwell was in her late 60s, elegantly slender, with the same ice blue eyes as her daughter and silver blonde hair styled with precision. She examined Marcus with the intensity of someone conducting a military inspection, cataloging every detail from his shoes to his posture to the way he held his daughter's hand. "Mother, this is Marcus Reed, and this is his daughter, Sophie." "Marcus, Sophie, my mother, Catherine Hartwell." "Mrs. Hartwell." Marcus extended his hand, which Catherine shook with a grip that was surprisingly firm, communicating strength carefully controlled. "Mr. Reed, a pleasure to meet you." Her gaze shifted to Sophie, and something softened in her expression, the way ice begins to crack when spring finally arrives. "What a lovely dress, dear." Sophie executed a small curtsy that she had learned from God knew where, probably one of the princess movies Marcus let her watch on weekends when her energy was low and going outside felt too risky. "Thank you. I picked it out myself because purple was my mommy's favorite color." Marcus saw Catherine's lips twitch with something that might have been amusement or approval or both. "Well, shall we sit?" The next 2 hours were a masterclass in upper-class interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Catherine asked questions with surgical precision, each one designed to extract maximum information while maintaining the veneer of casual interest. Where was Marcus from? Pennsylvania, originally. A small town near Pittsburgh that most people had never heard of. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the local diner was the center of social life. What did his parents do? His father had been a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant. His mother, a pediatric nurse at the regional hospital. Both passed now. His father from a heart attack when Marcus was 28. His mother from complications of diabetes 3 years later. How had he and Elena met? At work, which was technically true, though Marcus carefully edited the circumstances to suggest something more conventional than a terrified woman landing in his lap. What were his intentions? That question was harder to navigate, required careful deployment of truth mixed with strategic vagueness. Catherine's eyes never left his face as he explained that he and Elena were taking things slowly, getting to know each other, seeing where things might lead. Through it all, Sophie was the unexpected bridge. She charmed Catherine with the unself-conscious honesty of childhood, asking about the tea sandwiches, tiny food for fancy people, and the elaborate pastries, which she approached with the serious attention of a scholar examining ancient texts. When Catherine asked what Sophie wanted to be when she grew up, Sophie announced with complete confidence that she was going to be a doctor who fixed hearts, specifically children's hearts, because she knew what it was like to be scared about your own heart, and she wanted to make other kids less scared. She has spirit. Catherine's tone carried approval, and Marcus felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease. That's good. The world needs more spirit, especially in young women who know their own minds. She keeps me on my toes. And her mother? The question was casual, but Marcus felt its weight, understood that this was the real test beneath all the surface pleasantries. Not in the picture. Her choice. He kept his voice neutral, factual, refusing to let bitterness or grief color words that Sophie might hear and internalize. Lauren, my wife, she passed away 3 years ago. Breast cancer. She fought for 18 months, longer than the doctors expected, because she wanted to see Sophie start kindergarten. Catherine studied him for a long moment, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling she was seeing past every defense, every carefully maintained boundary, straight through to the grief he carried like a second skeleton beneath his skin. That must have been difficult. We manage. Sophie makes it easy. She's the best thing Lauren and I ever did together, and raising her right is how I honor what we had.
Daddy's the best daddy ever. Sophie announced this through a mouthful of lemon tart, apparently unconcerned with table manners now that she had decided Catherine was safe. He learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. He cooks better than restaurants, and he knows all the best knock-knock jokes, even though most of them aren't actually funny.
Catherine's eyes glinted with something that might have been respect. That's resourceful, Mr. Reed. Not many men would have the patience. Beside him, Marcus felt Elena relax fractionally, her hand finding his under the table and squeezing gently. This had been a test, he realized, and somehow, impossibly, he had passed. When the tea service finally wound down, Catherine stood with the same elegant economy of movement she had displayed throughout. Elena, walk me to my car. She turned to Marcus and Sophie. Mr. Reed, it was illuminating to meet you. Sophie, you are a delightful young lady. I hope we'll see each other again soon. They parted in the plaza's marble lobby, Catherine and Elena disappearing toward the Fifth Avenue entrance, while Marcus and Sophie waited by the ornate main staircase. Sophie was already fading, the sugar and excitement giving way to exhaustion that Marcus recognized as the precursor to one of her quiet spells, when her body reminded both of them that she was not like other 6-year-olds, that her heart required management and careful attention. "Can I sit?" she asked it quietly, and Marcus helped her settle on one of the velvet benches that lined the wall. "You did great today, sweetheart." Mrs. Hartwell was nice. Not scary like she looked at first. Sometimes people seem scary because they're trying to protect someone they love. Like you protect me? Exactly like that. Sophie yawned, leaning against his side with the easy trust that made his chest ache every single time. Is Elena your girlfriend now? The question caught Marcus off guard, direct in the way only children could be. Why do you ask? Because you looked at her like you look at me when I'm sad. Like you want to fix it, but you know you can't, so you just try to make it better by being there. Out of the mouths of babes. Marcus looked down at his daughter, at her serious expression, and wondered how someone so young could see so clearly what adults spent years learning to hide. Elaine is my friend. Sometimes friends need help. That's all. She needs a lot of help. I think maybe she does. Elena returned alone, her expression unreadable. She had put her armor back on during the walk to the car, her posture rigid, her face composed. But her eyes told a different story, showed something raw that the corporate mask could not quite conceal. That went well. She sat beside them on the bench with a weariness that seemed to settle into her bones. By my mother's standards, anyway. She liked you both. She liked Sophie. She liked Sophie. Elena agreed, and then her voice dropped, became something more vulnerable. But with you, from my mother, that's practically a marriage proposal. She doesn't approve easily. What did she say? After. Elena was quiet for a moment, studying her hands with the kind of focused attention usually reserved for contract negotiations. She asked me if it was real. Us. If we were actually together, or if I was staging a show for her benefit. Marcus's heart rate kicked up, awareness flooding through him that they were approaching territory neither of them had mapped yet. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know yet. Elena turned to look at him, and the vulnerability in her expression made his breath catch. Is that okay? That I don't know? Yeah. Marcus heard himself say it, felt the word reshape something between them. That's okay. What he did not say
What he was only beginning to realize was that he did not know either.
That somewhere between the park bench and this moment, between Sophie's acceptance and Catherine's scrutiny, something had shifted. The pretending had started to feel less like performance and more like rehearsal for something real, something that scared him more than any stalker or corporate intrigue possibly could. Because caring about Elena Hartwell meant opening himself to loss again, meant teaching Sophie that it was okay to love someone new, meant potentially betraying the memory of a woman who had fought cancer with grace and died asking him to promise he would find happiness again someday. The morning after the plaza, Marcus woke to find an email waiting in his inbox. The sender was Elena Hartwell, but it was not her corporate address. It was the personal one, the one she had scribbled on that business card in the park. Subject line: Thank you. Body: Thank you again for yesterday. My mother called this morning to tell me you're surprisingly grounded for someone in publishing. From her, that's practically a Nobel Prize. I owe you dinner, my treat. Let me know when works for you and Sophie. Marcus read the email 3 times before Sophie appeared in his doorway, already dressed in mismatched pajamas, her hair a magnificent disaster that would require significant negotiation. Who are you smiling at? She asked it suspiciously, with the particular tone children used when they sensed adults were keeping secrets. Nobody. Come here. Let's fix this hair situation. Are we seeing Elena today? No, sweetheart. Why do you ask? Sophie climbed onto his lap with practiced ease, handing him the hairbrush and a purple scrunchie that matched everything else in her carefully curated color scheme. Because you're smiling at your phone. You only smile at your phone when someone makes you happy. Marcus started working through the tangles, gentle but persistent, the way he had learned from too many YouTube tutorials to count. Elena's just a friend. Friends can make you happy. That's the point of friends. Sophie tilted her head, making his job harder. I like her. She talks to me like I'm real. What do you mean? Some grown-ups talk to kids like we're pets, like we're cute but not smart. Elena talks to me like I'm a person who knows things. Marcus's hands stilled for a moment, struck by the observation. Sophie was right. Elena had spoken to her with genuine interest, without condescension, treating a 6-year-old like someone whose opinions and observations mattered. You're very observant, you know that? I'm smart like you and Mommy. Sophie said it matter-of-factly, without ego, just stating a truth she had come to understand about herself. Can we have pancakes? We had pancakes yesterday. But these would be Sunday pancakes. Those are different. Despite everything, Marcus laughed. Sure, sweetheart. Sunday pancakes it is. Later, after breakfast and cartoons, and a minor dispute about whether socks were truly necessary on a Sunday when they were not leaving the apartment, Marcus sat at his laptop and composed a response to Elena's email. He deleted 3 versions before settling on simple honesty. Sophie and I are free Tuesday evening if that works. She's already asked when we're seeing you again, so fair warning, you've made an impression. Let me know where and when. Marcus. The response came within minutes, fast enough that Elena must have been waiting, watching her email with the same anxious attention Marcus had given his. Tuesday works. How do you feel about cooking? I have a kitchen that's criminally underused and enough ingredients to make something edible. 6 o'clock? I'll send my address. And Marcus, I meant it about owing you. This isn't pity or obligation. I'd actually like to see you both again. That last line, I'd actually like to see you both again, made something warm unfurl in Marcus's chest. He looked at Sophie, who was building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions, and wondered what exactly he was getting them into, what doors he was opening that might lead to places neither of them were prepared to go. Tuesday arrived with the peculiar anxiety of a first date that was not technically a date, but felt like something more significant than simple friendship. Marcus left work at 5, ignoring Lucas's knowing look when he declined the usual Tuesday beer at the bar down the street, and collected Sophie from after-school care with minutes to spare before they closed. Where are we going?
Sophie asked as they headed toward the subway, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. To Elena's apartment. She's making us dinner. Sophie's eyes went wide with excitement. At her house? Like a real visit? Like a real visit.
Do I need to wear fancy clothes? Marcus looked down at her school uniform, a jumper over a white shirt, already showing signs of a day's worth of 6-year-old adventures, a juice stain near the collar, playground dirt on the hem. You're perfect as you are, but maybe we should stop home and change into something comfortable. They did. Sophie selected her favorite jeans and a purple sweater that matched her scrunchie, her socks, and the hair ties she wore like badges of loyalty to a color that connected her to the mother she barely remembered. Marcus opted for casual but neat, aware that he was putting more thought into his appearance than he had in years, than he had since Lauren stopped caring what he wore because she was too tired from chemotherapy to notice anything except whether he was there beside her. The address Elena had sent was on the Upper West Side, a neighborhood of elegant pre-war buildings and tree-lined streets that felt like a different city from their Hell's Kitchen walk-up, wedged between a bodega and a laundromat. The building had a doorman who checked his list before allowing them entry, and the elevator was the old-fashioned kind, with brass fixtures and a mirror that made Marcus hyper-aware of his appearance, of how obviously out of place he looked in this world of inherited wealth and casual luxury. Sophie pressed her nose against the mirrored wall, watching the floors climb with fascination. "This is fancy." She whispered it like they were in a library or a church, some sacred space that demanded reverence. "Yeah, it is." Elena's apartment was on the 18th floor, and she answered the door in jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger this way, more approachable, and Marcus felt some of his nervousness ease. "Hi." She smiled at Sophie first, crouching to eye level with the natural instinct Marcus was learning to recognize as genuine, rather than performed. "I'm so glad you came. I made cookies earlier, but I think I might have burned them slightly." "That's okay." Sophie's tone carried the wisdom of someone who had eaten her fair share of cooking experiments. "Daddy burns things all the time." "I do not burn things all the time." "You burned the grilled cheese last week." "That was one time." Elena laughed, stepping aside to let them in, and the sound transformed her entire face into something that made Marcus's chest tight with awareness of how beautiful she was when she forgot to be the CEO, when she let herself just be human. "Come on in. Welcome to the evidence of my terrible domestic skills." The apartment was nothing like Marcus expected. He had imagined cold minimalism, the kind of showplace that appeared in architectural magazines, all glass and steel and uncomfortable furniture arranged for maximum aesthetic impact. Instead, Elena's home was warm, filled with books on every surface, comfortable-looking furniture that showed signs of actual use, walls covered with art that looked personal rather than purchased for investment value. The kitchen was visible from the living area, a large space with marble counters and professional-grade appliances that did indeed look underused, like props in a play about domestic life rather than tools for actual cooking. "This is beautiful." Marcus meant it, surprised by the warmth of a space he had expected to feel sterile. "It's too big for one person." Elena gestured toward the living room. "Make yourselves comfortable. I have coloring books and crayons if Sophie wants to entertain herself while we cook. Fair warning, I am not good at this. I can follow a recipe, but barely." "What are we making?" "I was thinking pasta, something hard to completely destroy." She pulled out ingredients from the refrigerator, fresh pasta and vegetables and cream, moving with the careful attention of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. "I have wine for us and juice boxes for Sophie, and if this all goes terribly wrong, there's a Thai place downstairs that delivers in under 20 minutes. Sophie had already found the coloring book, settling herself at the coffee table with the intense focus she brought to all artistic endeavors. Marcus washed his hands and joined Elena at the counter, and for the next hour,
They worked together in the kind of easy rhythm that usually took months to develop.
Elena chopped vegetables while Marcus handled the sauce, their movements coordinating without much discussion, bodies learning to share space in ways that felt natural despite how new this all was. She asked about his day, and he told her about the quarterly projections that never quite matched reality, about the politics of the analytics division that sometimes felt like warfare by spreadsheet. "It's brutal," Elena agreed, adding cream to the pan with more confidence than her earlier self-deprecation had suggested.
The business side, I mean. Everyone thinks publishing is about books and art, and it is. But it's also about profit margins and market trends, and keeping the board happy when all you want to do is champion the projects that matter, regardless of their commercial viability.
"Do you miss it?" Marcus asked, his hands busy with garlic and olive oil. "The editorial side, before you were running everything?" Something flickered in Elena's expression, nostalgia mixed with something harder to identify. "I loved finding new voices, championing books that mattered. But my father..." She stopped, stirred the sauce with more force than necessary. "He built this company from nothing, literally nothing. Started in a basement office in Queens with borrowed money and a belief that good stories could change the world. When he got sick, when it became clear that cancer was winning, someone had to take over. I was the only child, the only option. That's a lot of pressure. It's suffocating sometimes." She looked up at him, and the honesty in her eyes was startling, a glimpse past walls that probably took decades to build. "People think power is freedom, but it's the opposite. Every decision affects hundreds of employees, thousands of authors. One wrong move and people lose their jobs, their dreams, their belief that good work gets rewarded." She shook her head, seemingly frustrated with herself for revealing so much. "I'm sorry. You didn't sign up for my existential crisis about corporate responsibility." "I asked." Marcus kept his voice gentle. "And for what it's worth, I think you're doing an incredible job. The company's thriving. Literary fiction still has a home there when other publishers are cutting those divisions entirely. The company's surviving. There's a difference." She tasted the sauce, added salt with the careful attention of someone following instructions rather than instinct. "Tell me about Lauren, if that's not too personal." The change of subject was deliberate, a deflection from vulnerability, but Marcus answered anyway because the request felt genuine rather than polite. "We met in college, got married too young, had Sophie even younger. She tried to build a career as a freelance journalist, but motherhood wasn't what she expected. The isolation, the constant demands, the way time stopped being your own." He watched Sophie coloring, her tongue stuck out in concentration, completely absorbed in her artistic vision. When she got diagnosed, Sophie was 3. The doctors gave her 18 months, maybe 2 years with aggressive treatment. She chose the treatment not because she thought it would save her, but because she wanted to see Sophie start kindergarten. That was her goal, first day of school. Marcus's voice caught slightly, but he pushed through. "She made it, barely. Collapsed the night after we dropped Sophie off, went into the hospital, and never came home. But she saw her daughter walk into that classroom in her purple backpack, and that mattered more than any extra time the chemo might have bought." "I'm sorry." Elena's voice was soft, genuine sympathy without the awkward condolence most people offered. "I'm not anymore." Marcus started plating the pasta, needing something to do with his hands. "She fought like hell for Sophie. That's what love looks like sometimes. Not romance or grand gestures, but choosing pain if it means protecting someone who matters more than your own comfort. If I had to lose her, I'm glad I lost her to someone who loved our daughter enough to suffer for extra days." They ate at the dining table, which Elena confessed she had never actually used for dining before, had sometimes wondered why she bothered keeping it when she usually ate standing at the kitchen counter, scrolling through emails. Sophie entertained them with a detailed explanation of first-grade social dynamics,
which apparently involved complex alliances based on who had the best lunch snacks and who was good at Foursquare during recess. Hannah Miller has the organic fruit snacks from Whole Foods, Sophie explained through a mouthful of pasta. She's basically royalty. But Tommy Chen is better at math than everyone, so he has power too, but different power. Noted. Elena's tone was grave, treating this intelligence with the seriousness it deserved. Organic snacks equals social capital. Mathematical competence equals different kind of influence. Got it. After dinner, Sophie gravitated back to the coloring books while Marcus helped Elena clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, the domestic rhythm of it feeling oddly natural, like something they had done 1,000 times before rather than fumbling through for the first time. When Elena's phone buzzed on the counter, they both tensed. She checked the screen, and her face went pale, all the color draining out in an instant that made Marcus's protective instincts flare.
What is it?
Text from a number I don't recognize. She turned the phone so he could see. The message was simple, chilling in its brevity. Saw you at the plaza with the boyfriend and his daughter. Interesting choice. We need to talk. M. Marcus did not make it a question. Donovan. Has to be. No one else would. She stopped, steadied herself with visible effort. I'm sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of. That he'd come after you. After Sophie. He doesn't know where you live. Marcus kept his voice calm, factual, the same tone he used when Sophie's heart monitor alarmed, and panic would only make things worse. And your doorman has my name on the list for tonight. If Marcus tries anything here, security will stop him. You don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of when he doesn't get what he wants. Elena's hands were shaking as she set the phone down. Maybe this was a mistake.
Maybe you should. We're not leaving because he sent a threatening text. Marcus caught her hands, held them steady. That's what he wants. To isolate you. To make you feel like you can't have anyone in your life without putting them in danger. I won't give him that power. This isn't your fight. You made it my fight when you jumped in my lap and trusted me with your fear. He squeezed her hands gently. I meant what I said. I'm here. We're here. And one creepy text from a man who can't accept rejection isn't going to change that. Elena looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression, gratitude mixed with something deeper that made Marcus acutely aware of how close they were standing, of how her hands felt in his, of how badly he wanted to pull her closer and promise things he had no business promising. Thank you. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not used to people staying. Everyone eventually decides the complications aren't worth it. Get used to it. The moment hung between them, waited with possibility, until Sophie's voice broke through from the living room. Daddy, can we show Elena my drawing? The tension dissipated as they moved to the coffee table, where Sophie had created an elaborate crayon masterpiece featuring what appeared to be 3 figures holding hands, one tall with yellow hair, one tall with brown skin, one small with purple everywhere. That's us, Sophie announced with pride. Elena, Daddy, and me. I made Elena's hair yellow because it's pretty, and I made everything purple for me because that's Mommy's color, which means she's always with us even when we can't see her. Marcus felt his throat close around words he could not say. Watching Elena's eyes fill with tears, she blinked back before Sophie could see. This was his daughter, wise beyond her years, already understanding that love was not finite, that honoring the past did not mean refusing the future. They stayed longer than planned, the evening stretching into bedtime territory. When Marcus finally announced they needed to head home, Sophie protested with the indignation of someone being dragged from paradise. But we didn't have dessert yet. The slightly burned cookies, Elena remembered, disappearing into the kitchen and returning with a tin of cookies that were indeed slightly burned around the edges, but still looked edible. For the subway ride home, and Sophie, thank you for coming. You made this place feel less empty. Sophie hugged her without prompting, wrapping small arms around Elena's waist with the unself-conscious affection of childhood. Marcus saw Elena's eyes close, saw her hand come up to rest on Sophie's head with a tenderness that made his chest ache with understanding of how badly she wanted this. Wanted connection and family, and the kind of love that did not come with contracts or negotiations. At the door, Elena caught Marcus's arm, her voice low enough that Sophie could not hear.
That text? I'm going to forward it to my lawyer. Add it to the file.
But if anything else happens, if he contacts you directly, I'll call you immediately. And Marcus, she waited until he met her eyes. This was nice. All of it. Let's do it again soon. Yeah. He said it softly, meaning it more than he had meant anything in a long time. I'd like that. The subway ride home felt longer than usual. Sophie already half asleep against his side, the tin of cookies balanced on his lap. Marcus's phone buzzed, and he pulled it out to find a text from Elena. Thank you for staying. For not running when things got complicated. That means more than you know. He typed back quickly, aware that Sophie might wake up and start reading over his shoulder the way she sometimes did. Same time next week? I'll cook this time. Her response came immediately. It's a date. Marcus stared at those 3 words. It's a date. And wondered if she meant them literally, or if it was just a figure of speech, just casual language that did not carry the weight he was suddenly assigning to it. Either way, something had shifted tonight. The pretending had started to feel less like performance and more like possibility. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Later that night, after Sophie was tucked into bed with her heart monitor attached and her medications logged, Marcus stood on their fire escape looking out at the city. The October air carried the promise of winter, that particular Manhattan chill that smelled like possibility and danger in equal measure. He thought about Elena, about the fear in her eyes when she talked about Marcus Donovan, about the way she had looked at Sophie with longing so raw it hurt to witness, about the woman who controlled 38 floors of Manhattan real estate but could not control the man who refused to let her go. He thought about his own fears, about letting someone new into the careful life he had built around grief and survival, about introducing Sophie to someone who might leave, teaching her to trust again, only to potentially watch that trust shattered, about the walls he had built around his heart after Lauren died, walls that Elena seemed to slip through without even trying. His phone buzzed one more time. Elena again. I keep thinking about what your daughter said, about being sad under the pretty. She sees things, doesn't she? Things most people miss. Marcus typed back, leaning against the rusted railing of the fire escape. She's always been like that. Sees straight through to the truth underneath whatever performance people are giving. Elena's response took longer this time. Maybe that's why I feel like I can trust you. Because she trusts you. And children know things adults forget. Marcus read the message 3 times before responding. They do. They always know. He stayed on the fire escape until the cold drove him inside, thinking about trust and fear, and the woman who had crashed into his carefully controlled life, asking for help. Something was beginning, something neither of them had planned for or expected. And whatever came next, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same, that he had crossed some invisible line between helping a stranger and caring about someone in ways that made him vulnerable to all the pain he had sworn he would never risk again. The call from Principal Anderson came at 2:30 on a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after that dinner at Elena's apartment. 3 weeks of growing closer through careful dinners and weekend park visits, and the slow accumulation of trust that felt more dangerous than any stalker ever could. Marcus was in the middle of reviewing quarterly data when his phone rang with Sophie's school number, and his heart immediately dropped into his stomach, because calls from the school during the day always meant something was wrong. Always meant his daughter's fragile heart, or some playground accident, or one of the 1,000 catastrophes that haunted single parents of medically complex children. Mr. Reed, this is Principal Anderson.
I need you to come to the school immediately. The professional calm in her voice did nothing to ease the ice flooding Marcus's veins. What happened? Is Sophie hurt? She's fine, physically. But Mr. Reed, there's been an incident. About an hour ago, a woman came to pick up Sophie. She had identification from Hartwell Publishing and claimed there was a family emergency involving you. She knew details about your work schedule, Sophie's teacher's name, even your home address. Marcus was already grabbing his jacket, his body moving before his mind could process the full implications. Where is my daughter? That's what I need to explain. The woman left with Sophie, but your emergency contact, Mrs. Patterson from your building, called about 15 minutes ago to confirm details about next week's school play. When we told her Sophie had already been picked up by your assistant, she said you don't have an assistant. Mr. Reed, we've called the police.
They're on their way, but Sophie is not here. The world narrowed to a single point of absolute terror. His daughter, missing, taken by someone who had done enough research to be convincing, who knew enough to bypass the school's safety protocols. 27 minutes. That was how long Sophie had been gone, how long she had been in the hands of a stranger, vulnerable and scared, and probably wondering why her father had not come to save her. Marcus hung up without responding, his hands shaking as he called Elena. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting for disaster to strike. Marcus, what's wrong? Her voice carried immediate alarm, the kind of instant awareness that came from months of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Someone took Sophie from school. They had fake credentials from Hartwell Publishing. They knew everything, my schedule, her teacher, our address. Elena, my daughter is missing. He heard her sharp intake of breath, heard something break in her composure. Oh God, I'm coming. Where are you? On my way to the school now. I'll meet you there. And Marcus? She paused, and he heard the terror in her voice that matched his own. We'll find her. I promise you. We'll find her. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He arrived at the school to find police already there, taking statements, securing footage from security cameras. Elena appeared minutes later, her corporate armor abandoned entirely, just raw fear and the kind of determination that came from someone who had finally been pushed past every limit. She stood beside him as detectives asked questions, as school administrators apologized and explained and justified. The woman who had taken Sophie was described as professional, well-dressed, convincing. She had known exactly what to say, exactly what documents to present, had moved with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Then Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker, surrounded by police and Elena's trembling presence. Mr. Reed, this is Patricia Walsh, manager at the Morrison Hotel on Fifth Avenue. I believe I have your daughter here. The relief hit Marcus so hard, his knees nearly buckled. Elena's hand on his arm, the only thing keeping him upright. Where is she? Is she okay? She's fine. She's in my office right now with hotel security. Sir, there was a woman who brought her here, said she was waiting for further instructions. But your daughter told one of my staff that her daddy didn't call her daddy's person, that the woman wasn't someone she knew. We detained the woman and called you immediately. Marcus looked at Elena, saw tears streaming down her face unchecked, felt his own threatening to fall. I'm on my way. Don't let her out of your sight. They found Sophie in the hotel manager's office, small and scared, but unharmed, clutching a stuffed bear someone had given her. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, and the moment she saw Marcus, she launched herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. Daddy! He held her so tight she squeaked in protest, his face buried in her curly hair, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and the particular smell that was just Sophie, just his daughter, just the most important person in his entire world. I've got you. You're safe. I've got you. I told them. Sophie's voice was muffled against his shoulder, but he could hear the pride beneath the fear. I told them you didn't call.
that she wasn't your person.
Just like you taught me about stranger danger and tricks people use. Marcus's throat closed around a sob he could not release. Not here. Not in front of his daughter, who needed him to be strong. You did perfect. You were so brave, sweetheart. So brave. Elena hung back, watching the reunion with something devastated in her expression. When Sophie finally loosened her grip enough to look around, she spotted Elena and reached for her too. And Marcus watched Elena kneel beside them, her hands shaking as she touched Sophie's face, her shoulders, as if confirming the child was real and whole and safe. I'm so sorry. Elena's voice broke on the words. Sophie, I'm so sorry this happened to you. It's okay. Sophie's resilience was already reasserting itself, the way children could bounce back from trauma that would shatter adults. The hotel lady gave me juice and this teddy bear, and the police said they're going to catch the bad woman. Police questioning revealed what Marcus had already suspected with sickening certainty. The woman who had taken Sophie was Jessica Porter, a 32-year-old actress hired through an intermediary with instructions and payment that traced back, thinly but unmistakably, to accounts connected to Marcus Donovan. She claimed ignorance of the true nature of her assignment, said she had been told it was a family emergency pickup, a favor for a friend. But text messages on her phone told a different story. Detailed information about Sophie's school schedule, Marcus's work hours, even a physical description of Mrs. Patterson with explicit instructions to avoid her if she appeared at the school. Donovan had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The surveillance had been more extensive than any of them realized. Detective Hammond, the tired-looking man in his 50s who had seen too much to be shocked by anything, briefed them with professional detachment. We have enough to arrest Marcus Donovan for conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Combined with the restraining order violation, he may not have been physically present, but orchestrating this counts as contact. He's looking at serious charges. Federal charges, given the interstate elements involved in hiring Miss Porter. The detective's eyes were kind when he looked at Marcus. I don't care if his father is a federal judge or the president himself. What he did to your daughter crosses every line there is. We'll make it stick. That night they gathered at Elena's apartment because none of them could bear to be alone, because Sophie refused to let go of either Marcus or Elena, because the trauma of the day required proximity and the reassurance of physical presence. Sophie slept in Elena's bed, surrounded by pillows and stuffed animals hastily purchased from a toy store 3 blocks away, while Marcus and Elena sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets that could not warm the chill that had settled into their bones. This is my fault. Elena's voice was hollow, scraped raw by hours of crying and guilt. If I hadn't involved you, if I hadn't been so desperate for someone to stop. Marcus's tone was sharper than he intended, but he needed her to hear this, needed her to understand. This is Marcus Donovan's fault, only his. You didn't ask to be stalked. You didn't ask for any of this nightmare. But Sophie is safe because I taught her what to do in dangerous situations, because she's smart and brave and trusted her instincts. He reached for Elena's hand, held it tight. You've been part of her life for weeks now. She trusts you enough to have learned from you too. That combination kept her safe. Elena shook her head, tears tracking silently down her cheeks in the dim light from the city below. You should hate me. I brought danger to your daughter, the only thing in the world that matters to you. I could never hate you. Marcus pulled her closer, feeling her shake with suppressed sobs. I'm scared. I'm angry. But not at you. Never at you. They sat in silence for a long time, the city stretching out below them, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its towers and apartments. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I want you to move in. Both of you. Until this is over. Until Marcus is locked away and can't hurt anyone else. She turned to face him, her expression raw with need and fear. This building has security. Cameras. Doormen who know your face now. I can't Her voice cracked. I can't sleep knowing you're out there unprotected. Please. Marcus thought about his small apartment with the fire escape that anyone could climb, about the front door with its single lock that a determined person could break through. Thought about Sophie's terror today, about how close they had come to losing her to a man whose obsession knew no boundaries. It's a big step, living together. Sophie seeing us every day like this, that changes things. Makes this real in ways we haven't discussed. I know. Elena's eyes searched his. But I need you here. I need to know you're safe, both of you. Is that the only reason? The question hung in the air, weighted with everything neither of them had said yet, with feelings that had grown from pretending into something neither could deny anymore. No. Elena admitted it quietly, honestly, the kind of truth that felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was ground below. It's not the only reason, but it's the reason that matters right now, the reason I can justify without being terrified of what it means. Marcus looked through the glass doors to where Sophie slept, small and trusting, and completely unaware of how close she had come to being used as a weapon in someone else's war. Okay, we'll move in. Elena's exhale was ragged with relief. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, and they stayed that way until the first light of dawn crept over the Manhattan skyline, painting the world in shades of hope neither of them quite believed in yet. The call from Eleanor Donovan came 2 days later while Marcus was packing boxes at his apartment, sorting through the accumulated artifacts of a life he was temporarily leaving behind. His phone displayed an unknown number, and he almost did not answer, wary of anything unexpected after the kidnapping. Mr. Reed, this is Eleanor Donovan, Marcus's mother. Please don't hang up. Her voice was cultured, controlled, but underneath he heard something breaking. I'm not supposed to contact you. My husband would be furious if he knew, but I couldn't. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Marcus set down the box of Sophie's clothes, his full attention on the call. Why are you calling me? Because I'm scared. I don't know what my son has become, what he's capable of. When I heard what happened to your daughter, when I understood that he orchestrated taking a child. She stopped, composed herself with visible effort, even though he could not see her. I wanted you to know that I knew nothing about it, that I would never have condoned it. And I wanted to warn you. Warn me about what? Marcus isn't thinking clearly anymore. He's convinced himself that if he can just make Elena understand, she'll come back. He doesn't see what he's doing as wrong. He sees it as fighting for the woman he loves, as refusing to give up on something worth having. Eleanor's voice hardened. His father, my husband, thinks this will all blow over, that the family name will protect him like it always has, that we can make this go away with the right lawyers and the right connections. It won't. Marcus's voice was flat, certain. Not this time. I hope you're right. I'm trying to get Marcus help, trying to convince him to accept psychiatric treatment, to acknowledge that his behavior has crossed from persistence into something dangerous. But he won't listen. And William won't force the issue because he doesn't believe there's actually a problem. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Please be careful, Mr. Reed. Keep your daughter close. And tell Elena. Tell her I'm sorry for everything. Sorry for the son I raised who doesn't understand that love means respecting someone's choices, not trying to control them. The line went dead. Marcus stood in his half-packed apartment, the warning echoing in his mind, wondering what else Marcus Donovan was capable of, what other plans he might have set in motion before the kidnapping exposed him. Moving into Elena's apartment was supposed to be temporary, a practical arrangement born of necessity and fear. But from the first morning, it felt like something more permanent, something that reshaped all three of them in ways none could have predicted. Elena woke early, corporate conditioning impossible to break,
and attempted to make breakfast with enthusiasm that far exceeded her skill level.
Marcus followed the smell of something burning and found her staring at a pan of what might once have been eggs, her expression a mixture of frustration and determination. "Your stove runs hot." He gently moved her aside, assessing the damage. "You have to adjust for that."
"How do you know?"
4 years of cooking alone teaches you to read a kitchen. Every stove has its personality, its quirks. He scraped the pan and started fresh. Some things you can't learn from recipes, you have to feel them. Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in pajamas, her hair a magnificent disaster that would require significant negotiation before school.
"Is Elena cooking again?"
"She's learning." Marcus kept his voice neutral.
"Learning is good."
"Learning is good."
Sophie climbed onto one of the counter stools with practiced ease. "That's what Miss Rodriguez says. She says mistakes help us grow."
"Your teacher is very wise." Elena's voice carried self-deprecation that was almost charming.
"You should hear her when someone forgets their homework. Less wise and more terrifying."
The days that followed developed their own rhythm.
Elena left early for the office, but returned by 6 most evenings, earlier than she had ever managed when living alone, when work had been the only thing that filled the empty spaces.
Marcus worked his usual schedule, dropping Sophie at school with elaborate new security protocols, and picking her up precisely at 3, hyper-vigilant for any sign of surveillance or threat. Evenings were family time, a concept Elena admitted she had forgotten existed outside of theory. They cooked together, ate together, watched movies while Sophie built elaborate pillow forts in the living room. Elena read bedtime stories with theatrical flair that made Sophie giggle, and Marcus's heart ached with something he was not ready to name. "You're good at this," he told her one night after Sophie had finally surrendered to sleep, after the medications had been logged and the heart monitor attached, and all the small rituals of medical management completed.
"Good at what?"
"Being part of something. A family." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands like they held answers she could not quite read. "I never thought I'd have this. After my father died, after everything with Marcus, I thought I was meant to be alone, that maybe I deserved to be, that the price of power was isolation." "No one deserves to be alone." Marcus's voice was firm. "Not even people who push everyone away because vulnerability feels more dangerous than loneliness." Elena looked at him, and in her eyes he saw everything she was afraid to say. "I keep thinking about that day in the park, how desperate I was, how certain I was that I would always be running, always be hunted, never able to trust anyone enough to let them close." She reached for his hand. "And now I have you, both of you. I have something I didn't plan for and definitely don't deserve." "Love isn't about deserving." Marcus pulled her closer, and she came willingly, fitting against him like she belonged there. "It's about choosing to be brave enough to accept it when it shows up, even when it's terrifying." They kissed for the first time on that balcony, gentle and questioning, tasting like possibility and fear in equal measure. When they finally pulled apart, Elena's eyes were bright with tears. "I'm scared," she whispered it like a confession. "Me too," Marcus admitted, meaning it more than he had meant anything since Lauren died. "Scared means it matters." The calm shattered on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after they moved in. Marcus was at his desk reviewing data when Lucas appeared in his doorway, his expression grim. "You need to come with me. Now." The urgency in his voice made Marcus stand immediately, following Lucas toward the elevators without question. "What's happening?" Marcus Donovan just entered the building. "He's demanding to see Elena on the 38th floor. Security's evacuated the executive suites, but he's refusing to leave. Says he won't go until she talks to him." Marcus felt ice flood his veins, thinking about Elena up there, about Donovan's escalating desperation, about the restraining order that clearly meant nothing to a man who thought laws were suggestions
that did not apply to people with the right last name. The 38th floor was chaos when they arrived.
Employees had been moved to the stairwells, security guards flanking the hallway that led to Elena's office. And there, standing in the center of the executive floor, like a man who still believed the world owed him something, was Marcus Donovan. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes rumpled, eyes carrying the feverish intensity of someone who had lost touch with reality somewhere along the way. The polished predator from the park was gone, replaced by something more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and connections that had convinced him he was untouchable. "Where is she?" Donovan's voice echoed through the empty space, too loud, too raw. "I know she's here. I need to talk to her. I need to make her understand." Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between Donovan and the hallway to Elena's office, aware of every security camera filming this moment, of the phones out among evacuated employees capturing footage that would probably be viral within hours. "Marcus, you need to leave. You're violating the restraining order. Police are already on their way." Donovan's attention snapped to him, and something ugly twisted across his features. You're the one who poisoned her against me, playing the single father, using your sick daughter to manipulate Elena's sympathy. His voice rose, cracking with rage that had been building for months. "I know what you're doing. I see right through you. You want her money, her power, her connections. You're using her the same way you use that child as a prop. I'm not doing anything except caring about someone who deserves better than you." Marcus kept his voice steady, aware that everything he said was being recorded, that this moment would define how the story got told. "She belongs with me!" Donovan took a step forward and security guards tensed, hands moving to weapons they clearly hoped they would not have to use. "I waited for her. I supported her when her father was dying. I was there when she needed someone, and now she throws me away for some nobody analyst who doesn't understand her world." "She made her choice. You need to accept it." "No." Donovan shook his head violently, like he could dislodge reality itself through sheer force of will. "No, she's confused. You've confused her. If I could just talk to her, explain." "Marcus Donovan." A new voice cut through the confrontation, authoritative and final. Detective Hammond, flanked by uniformed officers, moving toward them with the deliberate calm of professionals who had done this too many times. "You're under arrest for violation of a restraining order, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and criminal harassment. Hands where I can see them." For a moment, Donovan looked like he might run, like he might try to force past security to get to Elena's office. Then his shoulders slumped, the manic energy draining out of him, leaving behind something that almost looked like defeat. "I just wanted to talk to her. I just wanted her to understand that I love her." They cuffed him without resistance, read him his rights with professional detachment. As he passed Marcus, Donovan's eyes met his, and there was something almost like recognition in them, something that looked like a man finally seeing the truth he had been denying. "She'll get tired of you too. Eventually. She always does." Marcus watched them take him away, feeling no triumph, only exhaustion. Elena appeared in the doorway of her office, her face pale but composed, watching the man who had terrorized her for 8 months finally being led away in handcuffs. "Is it over?" Her voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms. "He's in custody. Between the restraining order violation and the kidnapping charges, he's not getting out anytime soon." Elena nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the elevator where Donovan had disappeared, like she was waiting for him to somehow break free and come back. "I keep waiting to feel relieved, but I just feel empty. Like I used up all my other emotions and there's nothing left." Marcus crossed to her, took her hands in his, felt them trembling. "It takes time. The fear doesn't just evaporate because the threat is gone. Your body doesn't trust it yet." "How do you know?" "Because I'm still scared too." He pulled her closer. "But we're here. We're together.
and that's enough for now. The trial lasted 3 days, compressed into a proceeding that felt both too fast and agonizingly slow. Marcus sat in the courtroom gallery with Elena, watching prosecutors present their case with methodical precision.
Jessica Porter testified about the text messages, about the detailed instructions and payment that had seemed legitimate at the time, but now clearly showed calculation and planning. Bank records traced the money, showing a pattern of payments that started months before the kidnapping, evidence of surveillance and information gathering that was chilling in its thoroughness. Eleanor Donovan took the stand against her son, her voice breaking as she described his deterioration over the past year, her failed attempts to get him psychiatric help, her growing awareness that the boy she had raised had become someone capable of hurting others to get what he wanted. I tried to tell him that love means respecting boundaries, that if Elena said no, he had to accept it and move on. But he couldn't hear it. Wouldn't hear it. She looked at her son, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry I didn't see how far this had gone until it was too late. The defense attempted their strategy of diminished capacity, painting Marcus Donovan as someone whose obsession was illness rather than malice, whose childhood abandonment issues had created attachment patterns that made rejection unbearable. They brought in expert witnesses who talked about obsessive love disorder, about how his inability to accept Elena's decision was pathology rather than choice. But the prosecution countered with evidence of planning, of calculated decisions made over months, the hiring of Jessica Porter, the cultivation of informants inside Hartwell Publishing, the detailed surveillance that showed awareness and intention rather than compulsive behavior beyond his control. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts. Judge Elizabeth Chen, a stern woman in her 60s who had clearly seen enough privileged defendants try to buy their way out of consequences, delivered the sentence with clinical precision. This court recognizes the complexity of mental health challenges and the role they play in criminal behavior. But planning, execution, and the deliberate targeting of a child demonstrate calculation that goes beyond mere compulsion. She looked at Marcus Donovan with something that might have been pity mixed with disgust. Your wealth and your family connections do not place you above the law. 5 years in a secure psychiatric facility with mandatory treatment. 10 years supervised release after that. You will have no contact with Ms. Hartwell or the Reed family. Violation of these terms will result in immediate incarceration in a standard correctional facility. Standing on the courthouse steps in weak February sunshine, Elena let out a breath that seemed to carry months of accumulated tension. I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for his father's connections to make it all disappear, the way things always disappear for people with money and power. Some things even connections can't fix. Marcus pulled her close, aware of the reporters filming them, of the story this would become. Not when they cross certain lines. A reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. Mr. Reed, what do you want people to know about this case? Marcus looked at the camera, thinking about the men who would watch this coverage, the fathers and grandfathers who needed to hear certain truths affirmed. That good men still matter. That protecting your family isn't weakness. It's the most important thing you can do. That dignity isn't negotiable, no matter who's asking you to compromise it. His voice was steady, certain, and that truth still defeats lies when enough people are brave enough to stand up and testify to what they saw. The clip went viral within hours, shared across platforms by men who saw themselves in Marcus's quiet strength, who needed to believe that doing the right thing still mattered in a world that often rewarded exactly the opposite. 6 weeks after the trial, Marcus proposed. He had been carrying the ring for almost a month, a simple band he had chosen carefully, balancing what he could afford with something that honored the seriousness of what he was asking. He had planned something elaborate, something worthy of a woman who could have had anything she wanted, but in the end, the moment found him unprepared. They were in Madison Square Park, the same bench where everything had started, the same patch of grass where Sophie had first discovered the limping pigeon that she still visited religiously. It was Saturday afternoon, the first truly warm day of approaching spring, and Sophie was crouched near the fountain, feeding pretzel crumbs to what she insisted was the same bird, now accompanied by what she called its family. "They adapted. Just like you said, Daddy. Just like us." Sophie's observation carried the weight of wisdom that seemed impossible from someone so young. "They found each other and made something new." Marcus looked at Elena, at the woman who had crashed into his life asking for help and somehow stayed to become essential, to become home, in ways he had not thought possible after Lauren died. The ring was in his pocket. The words were on his tongue. The fear was real but manageable, because loving Elena had taught him that opening yourself to loss was the only way to access joy, that you could not have one without risking the other. Elena Hartwell. His voice carried steady despite his racing heart. "You threw yourself into my life like a force of nature, and nothing has been the same since." He pulled out the ring, simple and elegant, perfect for a woman who did not need flash to prove her worth. "You taught me that opening yourself to someone isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a person can do. That loving again doesn't betray the past. It honors everything that came before by refusing to let fear win." He held the ring between them, aware of Sophie watching now, of the moment crystallizing into something they would all remember. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you deserve every bit of happiness you've been afraid to want?" Elena's eyes filled with tears she did not try to hide. "Yes." The word came out like a release, like something that had been waiting to be said since that first afternoon when she had landed in his lap and whispered, "Please." Yes to everything. Yes to marriage and family and building a life together. Yes. Marcus slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, because some things were simply meant to be, because sometimes the universe aligned in ways that made terrifying leaps of faith feel like the only logical choice. Sophie appeared beside them, having apparently abandoned her pigeon diplomacy to witness the important moment. "Does this mean Elena's going to be my mom now?" Elena knelt to meet Sophie's eyes, her hand still trembling with emotion. "If you want me to be, we can make it official with adoption papers and everything. You'd be Sophie Hartwell Reed, if you want both names." Sophie considered this with the gravity she brought to all important decisions. "I want both names. They sound important together, like I'm connected to two families instead of just one." She threw her arms around Elena's neck with the force of a small hurricane. "I love you, Mom." The word hung in the spring air, new and precious, and exactly right. Elena's eyes closed, her hand coming up to rest on Sophie's head with tenderness that made Marcus's chest ache with understanding of how badly she had wanted this, how long she had convinced herself it was impossible. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." They stayed in the park until the sun began to set, 3 people on a bench where 2 strangers had once collided in desperate circumstances, watching pigeons and planning futures and believing, finally, that happiness was something they were allowed to have. The wedding was set for mid-April, a timeline that felt rushed by most standards, but perfectly reasonable for people who had learned that waiting for perfect moments meant sometimes missing the moments entirely. They combined the ceremony with Sophie's adoption finalization, turning one celebration into 2, creating a single day that would mark the official beginning of their family in every legal and emotional sense. The venue was a converted brownstone in Brooklyn with a garden that Sophie had declared perfect, though thankfully no pigeons actually attended the ceremony. 60 guests gathered on white folding chairs, friends, colleagues who had become friends, and Mrs. Patterson from their old building, who insisted on bringing Mr. Whiskers in a carrier because the cat would be offended if excluded from important life events. Catherine Hartwell sat in the front row, elegant in dove gray, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than most people's wedding attire. She had become an unexpected ally over the months since the plaza. Her initial skepticism transformed into something approaching maternal warmth.
at least by Catherine's exacting standards. Lucas served as best man, having argued convincingly that he had called the relationship potential before anyone else, and therefore deserved recognition for his romantic foresight. Elena walked down the makeshift aisle in a dress of ivory silk that made her look like she had stepped out of a different era, her hair loose around her shoulders the way Marcus loved it best. She was beautiful, but that was not what made his breath catch. It was the openness in her expression, the unguarded joy that she had spent so many years hiding behind corporate armor, the willingness to be vulnerable in front of witnesses, that marked how far she had traveled from the woman who had run through a park in terror. She reached him at the altar, and her hand found his with the easy certainty of coming home. "Ready?" "I've been ready since you landed in my lap and asked me to pretend." "I'm glad we stopped pretending." "So am I." The ceremony was brief but meaningful, personal vows exchanged under a canopy of spring flowers while their assembled loved ones bore witness. Marcus spoke about finding courage in unexpected places, about learning that opening his heart again was not betrayal of Lauren, but honoring everything she had taught him about love and sacrifice. Elena spoke about walls that had protected her so long she forgot they were prisons, about the man and child who had shown her what it meant to be truly seen and accepted exactly as she was. Judge Maria Santos, who had handled the adoption paperwork, officiated the second portion with warmth that belied her courtroom sternness. "Sophie, today the court officially recognizes Elena Hartwell Reed as your legal mother. This means she has all the rights and responsibilities of a parent, and you have all the rights and protections of her daughter. Do you understand what that means?" Sophie nodded solemnly, her purple dress catching the afternoon light. "It means we're a real family now, with papers and everything official, not just in our hearts." "That's exactly right," the judge smiled. "From this day forward, you are legally Sophie Hartwell Reed." "Congratulations," Sophie turned to Elena with beaming pride. "Now you're stuck with me forever." Elena laughed through her tears. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The reception was held in the brownstones garden, fairy lights strung through trees, good food and better company, and the kind of joy that comes from reaching the other side of something difficult and finding that survival was worth the struggle. Lucas gave a speech that managed to be both irreverent and touching, teasing Marcus about his stubborn idealism while praising Elena for seeing past corporate hierarchies to the man underneath. Catherine spoke too, surprising everyone, including herself. "When my daughter told me she had met someone, I was skeptical. I'd watched her wall herself off for years, convinced that protection meant isolation, that power required loneliness." She paused, her gaze finding Marcus across the reception. "I was prepared to find flaws, to identify weaknesses, to protect her from another mistake. Instead, I found a man who shows up day after day without expectation or demand, who teaches his daughter that strength and gentleness can coexist, who loves my daughter not despite her complexity, but because of it." She raised her glass. "To Marcus, Elena, and Sophie, may you continue teaching the rest of us what family actually means when you build it on honesty instead of obligation." Sophie surprised everyone by asking to speak, climbing onto a chair so people could see her. "My first mommy is in heaven. She watches over me and makes sure I'm okay. But now, I have a second mommy right here." Her voice carried across the garden, clear and certain, and I think that makes me the luckiest girl ever, because I get two mommies who love me, even though one is far away and one is right here. There was not a dry eye in the garden by the time she finished. The evening stretched into celebration, dancing and laughter, and the slow accumulation of memories that would become the foundation of their shared story. When twilight finally fell and guests began departing, Marcus found a quiet moment with his new wife, the words still feeling strange and wonderful on his tongue. "Mrs. Reed?" Elena smiled, the expression transforming her entire face. "Mr. Hartwell Reed? I'm keeping my name professionally, if that's okay." "Of course it is.
Nothing about you bothers me. Marcus pulled her close. Well, except maybe the pancake thing. That still bothers me a little.
I'm getting better.
You burned water last week trying to make tea. That was one time. They danced their first dance as a married couple to a song about storms and shelter and finding home in another person. And somewhere in the middle, Sophie joined them, lifted between her parents, and the photographer captured that moment, 3 people holding each other in the middle of a garden party, oblivious to everything except the family they had become. 18 months later, Marcus stood on the same park bench where everything had started, watching Sophie feed pigeons that she swore were descendants of the original limping bird. The morning had been perfect. Birthday pancakes that Elena had managed not to burn, presents involving too many purple things, and Sophie's announcement that 7 was definitely better than 6 because the number itself was luckier. Now, in the golden October afternoon, they had returned to where it all began. They're still here, Daddy. The pigeon family. They remember me. Sophie's certainty was absolute, unshakable by logic or ornithological facts. Elena sat beside Marcus, their hands intertwined, watching their daughter with the kind of contentment that came from surviving storms and choosing to believe in sunlight anyway. Do you ever think about that day? Her voice was soft, meant only for him. How desperate I was? How certain I was that I'd never escape him? Never have this? Every day, Marcus admitted. I think about the woman who crashed into my life asking for help. About how terrified you were. About how brave you had to be to trust a stranger. Do you think Lauren would approve? The question surprised him, but he answered honestly. I think she'd love you. She'd see through the CEO armor in about 5 seconds and get straight to the real you underneath. He squeezed Elena's hand. And she'd be proud of me for teaching Sophie about her, for making sure our daughter knows that loving you doesn't erase the past. It honors it by showing Sophie that good things can come after terrible loss. Sophie ran back to them, breathless with excitement.
I drew a picture at school for the anniversary.
She pulled out a carefully folded paper from her purple backpack, revealing a crayon drawing of 4 figures, 3 standing together, 1 watching from above in purple clouds.
That's First Mommy. Sophie pointed to the purple figure. She's watching us be happy, making sure we're okay. And that's us down here. Daddy, Second Mommy, and me. We're all together now, but she's still part of us.
Marcus felt his throat close around words he could not say. Elena pulled Sophie onto the bench between them, and they sat there as a family. 3 people who had found each other through circumstance and stayed through choice, honoring the past while building a future. Some families are born, Marcus said quietly. Some are built. The best ones are both, honoring what came before while being brave enough to create something new. Sophie leaned against him, content in the way children are when they feel absolutely safe. I like our family. We're good at adapting, just like the pigeons. Elena laughed, the sound carrying across the park, and Marcus thought about everything that had led to this moment, the terror and the trust, the stalking and the survival, the woman who had asked for help and the man who had said yes, without knowing it would change everything. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. And Marcus Reed knew with absolute certainty that every difficult choice, every moment of fear, every leap of faith had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this family, this life built on honesty and courage, and the radical belief that love was always worth the risk.